Chapter 9. There was no Dub FM on Thursday morning when Zack joined his father in the lounge. Instead, the serious tones of national radio announcers were commenting on the price of milk. It seemed that Crawford had had enough of Keith's rants. But the change of station didn't make the news of Crawford's brother Stanley go away. By the time Zack was eating his cereal, the announcers were talking about a protest in Wellington later that day. The Morris Investors Action Group, MIAG, were to protest outside Parliament buildings, demanding more controls on finance companies. After that, they were meeting with the United States ambassador to push their claim that Stanley's mansion in the Virgin Islands could be seized and sold to repay investors. The leader of the group was on air discussing their chances. According to him, they were pretty good. "If that happens, will we be able to go home?" asked Zack. Crawford shook his head. "If it's going to happen, it'll take years rather than months." "So we're going to be here for 6 months no matter what?" said Zack. "At least. I'm starting to think the book might take a little longer. I haven't started any writing yet." Zack returned to his cereal. He wasn't sure whether that was the answer he wanted or not. Tasha was making him change his mind about the place. When he first arrived, he thought there'd be nothing to do and no one to talk to, just 6 months of boredom. And yet here he was, getting up earlier each day, keen to get on with things. The problem was, would this continue when the school holidays finished and Jess had to go back to school? The way Crawford had things planned, Zack was going to be homeschooled, with Crawford as teacher. Somehow Zack had to change this. "This protest is a darned nuisance," continued Crawford. "Stanley's photo is going to be all over town again." Zack nodded. Earlier protests had used Stanley's photo as a symbol for business greed. "We need to go into town and get supplies," Crawford continued. "We're running short of milk and bread. It would be just my luck to go into a shop and find Stanley's photo on the front page of the paper." Zack looked at his father and smiled. "Have you looked in a mirror lately?" he asked. "No, haven't needed to." "Well, you should, because that beard is getting longer. I don't think people will recognize you." Crawford ran a hand over his face. "I don't know, Zack. Our blue eyes are distinctive, and eyes are important in recognizing people." A pause. "Do you think you could ride in and get some stuff?" "How far?" asked Zack, without enthusiasm. "Just Karori. There's a supermarket there." "Is that near the wildlife sanctuary?" "If you're talking about Zealandia, then the supermarket's closer. Why?" "Jess was talking about riding there tomorrow." "Great," said Crawford. "Then you can pick up some supplies on the way back." After breakfast, Zack wandered outside. He had several hours to fill before Jess got back from town. He couldn't go looking for Tasha because Jess had the Roldy, but he could go around to Karori Bay to see if the pickup was still stuck. He just climbed on his bike when his eyes caught a bright light coming from the other side of the Wairiki stream. It looked as if the sun was reflecting off glass or metal. This was worth investigating. Leaving his bike behind, he headed down to the shore where it was easier to cross the stream. There, on the other side of the water, he found tire marks curving out of the water and onto a track running alongside the stream. Zack followed, confident that the wheels were too close together to be the Neanderthal's pickup. The track climbed up a rise to where a sign told drivers they were now on private property and needed permission to go any further. Either the sign had been ignored or many people had permission, for a well-defined track continued up and on to flat area. In the middle was a large waterhole surrounded by deep but rutted wheel marks. It was obviously a popular place for four-wheel drive enthusiasts. Tracks led into and out of the water at all angles, some of them backing meters up a slope so that the drivers could get a decent run at the mud. Among all the dry wheel marks was a wet pair exiting from the valley side of the pool. Without these tracks, Zack would never have found the vehicle. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to create a parking space that would not be found. He soon understood why. On the back were two open dog cages. This vehicle belonged to pig hunters. Zack's first thought was for Tasha. What if the dogs found her instead of a pig? Would the hunters shoot? Yes, he said out loud. They sure would. What better trophy could you get than the skin of a big cat? On the western side of the stream was a terrace similar to that around the homestead. Zack climbed until he got a view up the valley. It was long and wide. His fears eased a little. There was enough space for pig dogs and cheetah never to meet, but the huge space also meant that finding Tasha was going to be difficult. Without the roldie, it would be impossible. From there, he climbed down to the stream below where the vehicle was parked. The dogs had clearly been excited. Paw prints were everywhere in the muddy banks beside the stream, deep depressions with well-defined claw holes. There were also two pairs of boot prints leading to the water. The prints caused Zack to think of the marks Tasha would leave. Maybe they would be the best way of finding her. He stayed on his side of the water, walking slowly upstream, searching for more marks. There was nothing until he got to a broad sandy area where there was a big circle of fresh tracks. One of the dogs had come through the stream and done a loop before returning to its mate. There was nothing else. Further on, large logs had been placed along the stream to block the off-roaders from going higher up the valley. The rough bridge was a good place for Zack to cross the water, so he decided to search the other side. It was as he went to get up onto the logs that he spotted the prints. An animal with paws had climbed there before him, but these were not a dog's paw prints. They had the same basic shape, 4 toes surrounding a large pad, but there were no claw marks. This animal could retract its claws. Zack pulled the camera out of his pocket and began photographing. He took some with his foot alongside for comparison, thinking he could work out the size when he got back to his computer. If trackers could identify an animal from its prints, then maybe he could as well. He was halfway across the log bridge when the peace of the valley was broken by a shot. The sound bounced around the hills, taking ages to die. Then came another. Neither was close by, and yet Zack flattened himself on the log with his legs dangling either side. Gunshots were even scarier than guns. When he thought the shooting was over, Zack sat up and scanned the valley. Nothing had changed. If he wanted to see what they had shot, he'd have to wait by the vehicle. He stood and turned back. He'd seen a good place where he could hide and wait, and keeping his footprints to this side of the stream seemed like a good idea. Best not to leave clues for the hunters to see. There was no knowing what they might do if they thought their illegal hunting had been uncovered. A dog was barking, loud and very close. For a time, Zack had no idea where he was or why. Then it came to him. He was hiding in a bush, waiting for the hunters to return. He must have dozed off, and now they were back. "Sue!" shouted a voice. "Get back down here!" Fortunately, the human sounded farther away than the dog. There were a couple more half-hearted barks before the animal obeyed. Then another voice. "Why'd you call her off, mate? Might have found another leopard." This was followed by a loud laugh. This got Zack's full attention. He parted the branches to see down to the stream. The hunters were still on the other side, each with a rifle and a dead pig on his back. The one who had called the dog answered, "You can take the piss if you like, but I know what I saw." He was the taller of the two. The other was short and powerful. Come on, mate. How would a leopard get out here? I'm telling you, I saw a leopard. Don't you believe the photo? The old thing in that photo is a pig. A big, old, spotted sow, probably. They splashed into the stream. That's because it wasn't the best view I got. By the time I got the phone out of my pocket, it was almost gone. I saw the head. It was a big, spotted cat. But it's white, complained the short guy. Leopards are yellow. The tall one said nothing. Zack could see that his jaw had clamped shut. He was not happy with his mate. Look, Brian, said the short guy. Forget about it. Please. They were now climbing a rise towards the hidden vehicle. Mate, don't put anything on the internet. Remember last time? Don't make that happen again. Brian remained silent. Tell me you won't, insisted the short one. Don't you think people need to be told if there's a freaking leopard running loose? But there isn't, is there? Brian stopped. What would it take for you to believe me, Sean? Tell me that. Sean turned to face him. Mate, I'll believe you when I see a leopard on your back, just like I now see a pig. Otherwise, don't mention the thing again. He resumed walking. Right, said Brian, glaring after his friend. That's what you'll get. Tomorrow I'm going to come back and I'm going to shoot that sucker. Then you and everyone else will have to believe me. Sean kept on walking. A moment later Brian followed, and soon both were in the bushes and out of sight. The only thing Zack heard after that was the two men yelling at their dogs to get into their boxes. Then the engine started, and the vehicle moved off. Zack stayed in his hiding place until well after the sound of the motor had gone. It wasn't that he worried about being seen. It was just that he didn't want to move. Moving meant accepting that what he'd just heard was real and not some nightmare he dreamt in his sleep.